Welcome to my show, When Everyone Wins, where a key goal I have for you is shifting from power over and under to power within and between. I'm your host, Judy Ryan. In each episode, I'll share my knowledge from decades in workplace culture transformation and leadership development as the founder and CEO of LifeWorks Systems. I'll help you build trust and emotional and social intelligence. My show, When Everyone Wins, is about creating a life you love and helping others do the same. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode. Today's episode is called Moving from Coercion and Compliance to Connection and Commitment. And I'm going to have two interviews with two different guests today on this topic. I'm super excited. In this episode, I'll be exploring how the use of power can be used to control and dominate or to encourage, guide, and support people. Control tactics, some of which are not considered to be so or are not critically challenged, are widely promoted and endorsed as conventionally acceptable in many homes, schools, and workplaces. But at what cost? The hits to internal motivation, well-being, exploration, discovery, trust, and joy in living are often overlooked. Perceptual blindness about honoring alternatives locks many people into behaviors that lack faith, and they lack positive beliefs in the potential and possibilities within all living beings. Today's guests will provide such honoring and effective alternatives and share some of the exceptional outcomes that can be accomplished when bringing connection, respect, and trust to the table that increase the internal drive to live from purposeful intention and to operate from values as is only possible through caring influence and support, which leads me to my first guest, Alfie Kohn. I have been such a huge fan of Alfie Kohn's for decades now, and I reference his research from his books, articles, and presentations in the work of my company, LifeWorks Systems. Alfie Kohn writes and speaks widely on human behavior, education, and parenting. He's the author of 14 books and hundreds of articles. He lectures at education conferences and universities, as well as to parent groups and corporations. Alfie's criticisms of competition and rewards have been widely discussed and, of course, debated. And he's been described in Time magazine as perhaps the country's most outspoken critic of education's fixation on grades and test scores. Alfie Kohn honors the best in adults and children. He believes in their innate goodness. He challenges the conventional thinking about motivation and control tactics, including those hidden in unrecognized conventional practices, such as the use of incentives and rewards, competition, and a focus on test scores. He provides a balanced and intelligent perspective on how to expand human potential through unconditional regard, supportive connection, and applying wisdom that fosters the intrinsic motivation and the personal responsibility in every adult and child. I deeply appreciate that he promotes the development of power within and power between instead of power over and power under. Thank you so much for joining the show today, Alfie, and welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm still pinching myself. So, Alfie, can you tell our listeners a little bit about where you are now with your work? Because I know you've been doing this work for so long, and I know, like many of us that are bringing something unconventional, you probably are disruptive to some people and others that find what you bring to be so valuable and they're so hungry for it. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about where you are right now in your work?
Well, I continue to address a whole range of topics within education and parenting and human behavior. New topics poke themselves up and ask to be addressed and connected to other topics. And so I'm always playing with these possibilities and looking at what the research has to say and speaking to folks who are interested in asking the radical questions, the root questions. Radical comes from the word meaning root. So instead of asking how we implement the same basic policies and approaches that we've done before, I'm asking people to take a step back and look at the premises that underlie what we assume is true in human interactions at work, at school, and at home.
Yeah, I mean that's the big word right there, assume. We're so mired in the status quo. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the kind of acceptable ways that people think it's okay to influence behavior, but they're actually harmful, and why you feel that way? For many people that we work with, they've never even thought about things like the harmful effects of competition or incentives and rewards. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Well, in broad terms, and of course, all dichotomies are quite limited, but in broad terms, there's a difference between doing things to people and working with people.
Yeah, yeah,
And we all, given that choice, would presumably say working with sounds nicer. The problem is that we fail to understand a lot of common interactions as being about doing to.
hmm,
And so, for example, we use euphemisms to deny the reality of punishment. A punishment consists of saying to somebody who has less power than you do, it's all about power differentials, um, do this, or here's what I'm going to do to you.
right,
I'm going to make you suffer if you don't jump through my hoops. But that sounds unpleasant and yucky. So, we use euphemisms like talking about accountability, for example, or in the case of kids, consequences for
yeah,
what they do. So we deny the reality of punishing them. We also have euphemisms for very specific punishments. For children, for example, we don't call it forcible isolation when they need us most. We call it timeout
right,
because that's sounds innocuous.
yeah,
Or we assume that punishment A makes a lot more sense than punishment B, and so we restrict the range of our discussion to that question. Again, with kids, it would be don't hit them. Uh, do a timeout. In other words, don't harm them physically, harm them emotionally instead.
right,
And you have folks, pediatricians and so on, and therapists who will talk about don't spank your kids, take away a privilege. Instead of asking the broader question, does punishment ever make sense? Or is
right,
that basically just about imposing power to get mindless obedience? Now, the next step, once people realize that punishment, regardless of the type, is going to be counterproductive, which is what the research says, not merely ineffective, but actually doing harm. And that's true when more powerful adults use punishment against less powerful adults, say in the workplace. And it's true in the classroom as well. But the next step for people who get that is to assume it makes more sense to reward. Instead of saying, do this, or here's what I'm going to do to you, we say, do this and you'll get that. It's about carrots, not sticks. But
right,
the reality is that rewards and punishments are not opposites. They're two sides of the same coin. They're both about doing two. And the questions that people of all ages tend to ask when they are the recipients of either punishments or rewards can clue us into how counterproductive they are. If somebody threatens to punish me if I don't obey, I'm going to ask, what do these people with the power want me to do? And what happens to me if I don't do it? But
right.
if they offer me a reward for compliance, they're going to ask the question, what do these people with the power want me to do? And what do I get for doing it?
Yes,
In both cases, it's not only about compliance rather than independent thinking. And not only is it about power in both cases, but it's also really um, about the extent to which we are not being persuaded, we are being objectified,
hmm,
we are being treated like objects whose goal is to do whatever the person with the power proposes. So, in many of my books and articles, I talk about what the research shows and how rewards tend to be just as counterproductive as punishments.
Yes, I absolutely am so aligned with everything you're saying. And what's interesting to me, Alfie, is I was listening to something the other day about they're starting to recognize that the reasons that we have leanings towards authoritarianism is how we raise children. And I've been saying that forever. People don't like to look at what even I bring to corporations when I start playing with those sacred conventional belief systems like punishment and reward. And I use an Adlerian psychology approach. And I remember hearing a talk that I still share to this day that you did about how consequences, which was from Dreiker's work, I never felt right about that to begin with. And you talked about how it's punishment light. And I think what I do really believe in from all of this is how important it is to do what Adler called spitting in the soup, which is what you and I do. We spit in the soup of something that people believe is so good. You even talked about how praise is kind of like the verbal punishing and rewarding, and how hard that is to give up. And so I really appreciate what you're saying about it's doing to people as opposed to uh, helping to influence them and guide them and support them. And Alfie, I just want to say one other thing, a couple, maybe two. You talked about objectifying people. It's really dehumanizing people, which is the first step toward eliminating people from the world, you know. And so all these little practices that we're doing, we're actually setting up our society to be less compassionate, less empathetic. The other thing is, I do the work that I do because in my life, my family was very loving on the surface and they were loving, but they did a lot to me. And because they did a lot to me, I made it my life's mission to create conditions and conversations where you don't do things to people. And that's a much more rich kind of alternative. So could you speak a little bit to the alternative to the status quo when we're not doing things to people? What are we doing instead? Because I know you're about building the intrinsic motivation within people, not coming at them from the extrinsic motivation.
Well, perhaps a word about the difference between those two things for people not familiar with the terminology. Part of the problem in workplaces and classrooms is that we tend to just think of motivation as a unitary phenomenon. You can have more of this thing called motivation or less of it. It can go up or it can come down. So we want people who have less power than we do, our children, our students, our employees, to have more of this stuff called motivation. But the reality is that there are different kinds of motivation, and the kind matters more than the amount. So the most common way that psychologists talk about this are the terms you used, extrinsic and intrinsic. And even, by the way, a lot of people who know those words and can define the difference, if asked, go right back to talking about how do we motivate people, as if there were no substantive difference. So intrinsic motivation is a fancy term that means you find meaning and joy and purpose in what you're doing in its own right. You're reading a book because you get a kick out of reading or this topic or this author. Extrinsic motivation means you do something in order that something outside of, extrinsic to the task will happen. Like you get a sticker or a gold star or a bonus or a good job. All of those, and yes, praise is just a verbal doggy biscuit. Um, all of these are ways of trying to induce artificially people to do things. And what the research shows is that intrinsic motivation isn't just a lot more powerful in the long run. Intrinsic motivation is also undermined by extrinsic motivators. The more you reward people for doing something, the more they tend to lose interest in whatever they had to do to get the reward.
Yes.
So, an excellent way to destroy people's excitement about their work, assuming there's something there to get excited about, which is a very big if. The best way to destroy that is by pushing extrinsic motivators in their faces, like pay for performance plans or patronizing pats on the head by the boss, and so on. So now, stuff that they might have found interesting and worthwhile to do in the beginning now become less intriguing to them and just a means to the end of getting the extrinsic motivator. Now, a working with approach takes on a very different cast depending on what we're talking about, the age and status and topics involved, the situation and circumstances. But one thing that I think defines a working with approach is frankly to do a lot more asking and a lot less telling, to give people more say about everything that they're doing, regardless of the circumstances or their age. Kids learn how to make good decisions by making decisions, not by following directions.
Yeah.
And in general, there's a strong psychological need that all of us uh, to have to feel like origins in our lives, as one researcher put it, instead of like pawns. So that means autonomy support,
Yeah.
that people who are leaders, who are teachers or managers or whatever, are figuring out how to support the rights of not just individuals, but people working together as communities in more democratic environments to have more say, more choices about what they're doing. That's one key aspect of the working with approach.
I love it that you talked about asking questions. We have an acronym we use. It's called SLAM. It's say less, ask more. And it really causes people to go into critical thinking. I raised my own children that way. By the time they were 5 years old, they all knew how to run a family meeting because I wanted them participating. You're right. People can't learn how to hold themselves accountable, how to choose what they want if they're not invited, if there's no curiosity about the way that their mind is working or where their initiative is. And that's again why I do the work I do, because I didn't have that. As loving as my parents were, they were all about you're a blank slate and my job is to write on you. I do want to ask you if you could share the story that you tell about the guy who's being harassed by the middle school kids and how he was able to. I just love that story and I'd love to hear it from your own voice for our audience. Do you remember which I'm talking about?
Yes, yes. No, I know the one you mean. Yes. So an old guy lived near, I believe it was an elementary school, the way I originally framed it. And on the way home from school, the kids would stop by his house and scream up nasty epithets and insults at him. Ah, you stupid old prune. Hey, you old fart. And he got tired of this. So he came up with a plan. And the next time the kids came to yell at him and harass him, he walked out and surprised them. And he said to them, kids, if you come here and yell this stuff at me again tomorrow, I'll give each one of you $1. Well, this was a huge surprise. Even more of them showed up the next day and yelled at him even louder about how stupid and old and bald and wrinkled he was. And to their amazement, as promised, he came out and paid off his hecklers. Here you go. Here's $1 for you and $1 for you. Thank you. If you come back tomorrow, I'll give each one of you $0.25. Well, that wasn't as good, but it was still pretty good. So they came back the next day and screamed and taunted him again. And he came out with a roll of quarters and he paid them off. Here's a quarter for you, quarter for you, and so on. And if you come back tomorrow, I'll give each one of you $0.01. They looked at each other incredulously. $0.01? Forget it. And they never came back again.
I love that. I
So the
absolutely.
analysis, of course, here now is the kids found it intrinsically motivating to taunt the guy until they were rewarded for doing it, at which point they became hooked on the reward. And so when the reward was no longer there, neither were they.
Yeah.
That was what I call the old man's plan. And yet, the same thing is going on in workplaces and in families and in schools where people's intrinsic motivation is being undermined by extrinsic motivators.
Yeah, yeah, Alfie, I absolutely am so grateful that you shared that in your own voice because that is such a powerful story about what we're talking about. And it's almost like people are perceptually blind to see that until you see a story like that. I wanted to ask you, I know that I have to be certain, I could be wrong, but you tell me that you get a lot of grief for wanting to develop people instead of doing things to them, because it's so threatening to people that are committed to doing things to people. But what I want to ask is, can you share a success story or two of something that you've seen that you've been able to impact the shifting of doing things with people or helping them come up with their own intrinsic reasons for doing things, that have come out of either some of your books or some of your lectures or the work that you do? Because I think what allows the listeners to move in your and my direction is to know that this stuff works, that it works to treat different people differently than the power over dynamics we use with them.
Well, I tell a lot of stories of people doing this sort of thing, not necessarily with my help, but things I've observed in my books. In my book, Punished by Rewards, there's two chapters about parenting, two about education, and two about the workplace. After the first half of the book, laying out the general principles. I mean, I'm not sure I have a story I can point to. In fact, I tend to have a negative reaction to people who write books and fill them with stories of the amazing miraculous cures that they and their theories have had on other people in an attempt to sell their brand and so on. I'm more interested in focusing on the topic itself. And if I had something to do with it in bringing this to their attention, great. In many cases, I'm there, say, in the back of the classroom taking notes so that I can share what a teacher on her own figured out how to do with other teachers. I remember once I was at a conference during the lunch break, and a teacher was talking about a elaborate plan she had and wanted to know if it was what I would call a working with plan. If I did it this way instead of that way, do you think that would make more of a difference in your experience? And I said, gee, I don't know. Have you asked the kids? And a look came over her face like, I never thought of that, you know? So I don't expect enormous commendations for asking a question like that to me seems pretty obvious. But for a lot of folks, that question of, did you consult with the people you're doing it to, is an example of how it makes sense to take a step back and question, again, as we were talking about, the premise of what you're doing. So it's not merely about a manager, for example, who creates a more enlightened or evolved set of practices in a workplace. It's more about the question of whether the plan is done with people rather than for them.
Yes.
And one of the reasons that that isn't more popular and widespread, maybe that nobody's ever asked them that question or they've never read the research or whatever. Part of it, I think, is that we live in a society where we're not really encouraged to do this. We're not only are punishments and rewards accepted, they're expected to the
Yes.
point that their absence seems weird.
Hmm.
But then there's the typical and I think more troubling question, which is, um, what are we getting out of the status quo? Would I have to question everything that I've been doing as a parent, teacher, or manager up until now? And more unsettlingly, would I have to question the way I was raised, which can be very disconcerting.
Yeah.
So the people who are in positions of power are in a position where it is much easier to tweak the implementation of the same basic system that they're very familiar with and that we're all have come to accept in our society. So what I do with people, I usually start my meetings by asking folks, what are your long-term goals for your children, your students, your employees? How do you hope they'll turn out in the long run? And then what I do for a living is to say to people, you say you want this, so how come you're doing that?
Right.
Because here's the research showing that that isn't getting you even your own long-term goals. Forget what I or you would want.
I love this. So, Alfie, I consider those success stories. You living what you're teaching, which is asking those very Socratic questions. What are your long-term goals? What are the practices that you've been using? I do that with corporate clients, talking about what is going on with engagement year after year after year. So clearly, something that we're doing is not working. Would you like different results? And I also appreciate that you don't want to look at it as you are the cause of these success stories, but in essence, bringing the research forward, despite the fact that people get so dysregulated about having to look at their own childhoods and their own way of raising children. That's what I mean when I say you probably take a lot of flack. And what I see in you that I very much appreciate is that you are more concerned about bringing forward what is truly healthy and useful than whether people like your message or not. I really feel that in you. And it's inspiring to me because it's not like you're overly attached to whether people like what you're saying all the time. You're all about helping them.
Well, yes and no. I mean, right, I'm not just in it to get praise myself. On the other hand, if I go around shouting about this stuff to people who just react with some variation of la 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 la, I can't hear this, then I'm not doing what I set out to do. So I've spent my career trying to figure out um, how to invite people to rethink what it is they're doing and are believing in a way that's likely to be. I mean, if people come up to me after one of my lectures and say, that was very thought-provoking, I say thanks. But my hope is to be a little bit change provoking. And
Yeah.
if that's not happening, I have to take responsibility for it rather than saying there's something wrong with you, and figure out how to reframe the message and also act out these ideas of doing more asking than telling.
So as we're wrapping up this interview, Alfie, I want to say something and I want to ask something. I do believe that when you say people are going la 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 la, I have a prayer every day for my own life. Please send me the people who are ready for this message because I don't want to push any rocks up the hill. And I think that's what you're saying as well. But I also know that you are bringing in thought-provoking and change-provoking information that will be absolutely essential to the well-being of our planet, of our peoples, of our America, of all the countries of the world, and it's that important. So my last question to you would be, what would be the best first step somebody could take to know more about your work? What book should they read? What lecture should they listen to? So that we can end with them having something they can do, because I am absolutely certain that what you do is essential to the life on this planet. I really do.
Well, thanks, and thank you for the question, which is pretty easy. Go to my website, which is alfiecohn, KOHN.org, which has information about all my books, as well as a whole lot of articles and blog posts. And I'm about to start a podcast, since currently I'm one of 37 people in the country who doesn't have one. And all of that is on the website, so people can choose which of the subtopics or ideas or ways into the things you and I have been talking about are most appropriate for what they want to learn more about.
Alfie, I can't tell you how honored I am that you've been on this show, because this show is about everyone winning, and everyone can't win if we don't honor the power within people, the mission that they have for their own life, being able to help bring that forward. And that's what I see in you. I see in you somebody who is absolutely living that shift from power over and power under to power within and power between. And I invite my listeners to go to your website. It's alfiecohn.org, not .com, and to really start looking for where you can get started with his work, because it is so essential. And I just will follow you, and anything you want to share with us, we will put it forward on our social networks so that we can continue to support your work. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Appreciate your interest.
Welcome back, everyone, to this episode on moving from coercion and compliance to connection and commitment. Again, this episode is about how we can either use power to control and dominate or to encourage, guide, and support. And today's second guest is somebody that also honors effective alternatives and sharing exceptional outcomes when you bring connection, respect, and trust to these dynamics, not only with people, but also with our four-legged and other-legged creatures of the earth. So let me introduce you to my second guest, Kristen Schweitzer. I have known Kristen for 10 years now. I met her the first time when I started working with her company, Essa Health, where she still works. She was a manager then, now she's a director there. She thoroughly embraced the culture transformation process that I brought to her workplace because Kristen not only saw the positive impacts of a personal responsibility and a shared power model for her company, she also recognized the value of it as an alternative to conventional parenting and raising her four children. She was very familiar with the individual psychology that we use by Alfred Adler. And so since that time, Kristen has evolved even further. She is, in addition to working as a director in ESSA Health, she's a mentor, an author, an advocate for connection-driven learning. And she's going to be telling us what that means. In her forthcoming book, which I've read most of and I absolutely love it, it's called I Centaur: Co-Regulation Mentorship for Horses, Humans, and Mastery. She explores how emotional attunement, imitation, and feedback shape effective mentorship. Kristen developed the Centaur mentor model, a framework applicable to riders and horses, teachers and students, parents and children, managers and teams, any relationship where influence and behavior change are key. At Calling Bird Farm Academy, she teaches horsemanship through a structured levels-based curriculum, emphasizing straightness training as a licensed straightness training instructor and using long work. I think that's the way you say it. She'll let me know. To develop
Lunge, yeah.
lunge work, to develop an independent seat. Beyond the equestrian world, Christian is the director of analytics at ESSA Health, blending her analytical expertise with heart-centered mentorship. She holds a degree in economics from WashU, an online MBA, and multiple health IT certifications. She's passionate about the intersection of neuroscience, mentorship, and personal transformation. She views horsemanship as a path to self-mastery. Kristen lives in Wildwood, Missouri with her husband, their four children, three horses, and a pony. Welcome, my very dear friend, Kristen.
Hello, Judy. It's so good to see you and talk with you.
You know what I love about you, Kristen, is you are so analytical and so brilliant. I always think of you as like a freak, a genius freak or freaky genius, but you've also developed this whole heart-centered attunement side. And I see in your book that it feels like the work with the horses and all of that has even further strengthened the integration of the body, the mind, the spirit, the heart, all of it. So, can you tell our listeners about some of the themes in your book, I Centaur, that are related to the positive and negative ways of influencing behavior, not only in horses, but also in humans, because there's such a correlation?
Yeah, there's absolutely a correlation. I see it holistically as all the same thing. How I act when I'm with my horses or my students or my children, or as being led by my own leaders in the corporate world, or there's a shared power in a marriage too. Like sometimes my husband's leading the dance and sometimes I'm leading the dance in our family. But to me, it's all the same. I can show up as the same with the same goals everywhere. I don't have to compartmentalize. And some of that, I think, and Alfie alluded to this in the euphemisms, that cognitive, that I don't know, there's a conflict there. Like in the horse world, people often say the horse needs to show respect when really we're asking for control and submission. And I really get it. I know I'm getting off of your question here. I really get it because horses are large. They can kill us very easily without even trying. And so people operate out of fear and they get into control. So I'm very empathetic to that. I totally understand that. and yet I want to see a different way. So the centaur model is based on the mythical creature of the centaur, half human, half horse. So you get the power and the beauty and the strength of a horse, and you get the rational mind of a human, the best of both worlds. And I believe that we can do that when we ride horses. I see it, I feel it, I know it's possible, it's beautiful, because the rider, our rational mind, can plan and lead the horse's body because they have a superior body. We have a superior mind. And I know that it has connotations of good and bad and better than, and that's not what I mean. But our strengths, our strengths are our superior mind, and their strength is their superior body. And we're connected. We're both mammals. We both have heart and soul, and we're connected that way so that the horse can be led by the rider. And I used the felt experience of ballroom dancing, because when I'm submitting as a ballroom dancer to usually my husband, there is the most amazing beauty to it. So I believe that the role of a writer, whether you are a parent, a manager, anytime you're influencing, when you can see a vision for someone that you want to create together, and they need the effort, I believe that when we're the writer, we connect through the heart, and we can pull up the physical effort and discipline needed to create things in the world. I mean, I just can't. I'm really on a kick on this. I was making coffee, and I thought some human mind made that coffee maker a physical reality. Like, we have such magic to be able to do that. And so we have an extra level of a synergy of doing that together as a dyad, as a centaur with a horse, or as a parent, or as a family, or as a corporation. And to be able to tap into that, ultimately, I think we need to do attunement and connection first. And that is the heart of what the book is about.
I definitely want you to speak on both of those. I do want to say something. I'm getting chills as I'm listening to you. I just love what you're saying, because surrender is a two-way street. Like, you're surrendering, the horse is surrendering. And also, when you talked about the fear of the horse is more obvious, but a lot of people have fear of one another because of the
Oh,
way
yeah.
they were raised. And it's usually unconscious in us. And then we're operating from that fear. So we're not surrendering. We're not doing that dance with one another. That's so beautiful. And I even think about it for myself with my creator. How do I surrender and have that dance with creation in a way that allows my life to have that magic and that beauty? So I really appreciate that message. And it sounds a little bit like out there when you think of a corporate, for example, or really any dynamic that may not be as intimate as a marriage or a family, but it really is what we all hunger for. So can you talk a little bit more about that attunement and that, what did you say the other one was? Attunement and,
I don't remember.
okay,
Attunement, connection.
that's okay. Just talk about attunement. It'll
Yeah.
come.
Yeah, it's interesting. Attunement, and I use it in the mammalian sense of basically a parent and a child. All of us mammals have this, what I think of as software or hardware. We are all brought into the world. Every mammal has to have an attachment to a caregiver, and it's usually the mother, but there's allo parents everywhere. We cannot get rid of that. It is a superpower. It's how we're built, and we're all wired for it. And, those of us who have had some trauma or, you know, harder times with that, it's like those weeds growing in the sidewalk. We are made for that. We are going to be, plants toward the sunlight of attunement for our entire lives. And when it happens, we will, when you feel safe, seen, and soothed, when you're connected with someone, you can access your neocortex and thinking mind even more. If you're in a sympathetic fight or flight, you literally cannot think. People go into panic mode. Horses too. Everybody does. You see a frozen look on kids when they're, caught, or like as a parent, if you give a disapproving glance, their neocortex shuts off. So attunement, to break it down, this is kind of materialistic, but to break it down, and there's a lot of study and science behind this. When a parent, and I'm going to use parent child, but this is true even if you're a leader in a corporate world, and a lot of military leaders show up like this over and over. It does not need to be ooey gooey. It does not need to be uncomfortable. Everybody has a different threshold. There are different levels of appropriate or not appropriate, but you can attune with anybody. You just have to tell them that they're safe, they're seen, and they're soothed. And I mean soothed in an Adlerian sense. They're superior to the challenges of life that are coming up. And as riders, as guides, as parents, as any leader, we can help calibrate and guide them to an appropriate threshold. So what might be overwhelming for one child or horse, we can identify that and help kind of make the puzzle of life more appropriate for them. They can overcome that, and then they can climb to a bigger challenge. And that's what all good leaders do. So
Yeah, I love that you said it doesn't have to be ooey gooey because from my work, I'm not ooey gooey, but
Mhm.
it is about creating that psychological safety. It's about having those questions asked of one another so that you do feel seen, you do feel soothed, you do feel important, you do feel that you matter.
Mhm.
Um, and so I love that it's a way, because otherwise I think people do think power within and power between sounds ooey gooey, and it
Yeah.
isn't.
No,
It's
it's not. It's well, and like Alfie was saying, it's efficient. It is so efficient. And and I know that I say this with a lot of love, right? I'm a woman and I work primarily with men and I work in IT. And I have found that using the safe, seen, soothed over and over in professional settings, you can do this in a very, quote, corporate way, and people respond to it. They feel safe, seen, and soothed. It's like it does not need to be ooey gooey because it's so easy. It's so easy in the yin and yang of the world for righteous people to do unrighteous things. It's so easy for people to do, quote, loving things and enable people and control and manipulate out of love, but it ends up really hurting them, that
I, I
codependency.
I think that's why I do the work I do, Kristen, because that codependency was in my family. Even though there was a lot of love and warmth, it was not the feeling of being seen.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't feel seen as part of that safe, seen, and soothed, it does a lot of harm. And I think it's so subtle, and we even think it is being loving to do to people
Yeah.
and, and to control things so that they somehow are safe in whatever world that person believes. But it's just not helpful. It's not efficient. So I love it that you have this the whole package of it: safe, seen, and soothed. It's all of it. Because I was
Oh, yeah.
safe.
And it's not me. That's the science. That's what creates a secure attachment.
Yeah, but I mean, being able to see all three parts of those. So I was safe and I was soothed, but I was not seen.
Yeah.
And it did a huge number on me. And I think there's a lot of people in all walks of life that are missing one or more of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It is
so
kind of a checklist in a way, right?
yeah, like all of them are needed. Firm and respectful, safe and seen. Even firm and respectful does not make somebody feel seen all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I highlight the word soothed because soothed does not mean take the challenge away. It doesn't mean rescue. It doesn't mean exempt. It means help meet the needs of the situation with the resources that your horse has or your child has, and then expand it.
Yeah, it's encouragement. It's
Yeah.
not enabling, it's not pampering and spoiling, it's helping to
Yes.
build the courage within somebody, which kind of fits with what Alfie said. It's not doing things to them which would make them think they're less capable. It's helping do things with them, which brings out the courage within them.
Mhm.
Wow. Wow. So is there anything that you want us to know about the book? Because I think what's so interesting about the book is it would appeal to the people that are in the horse business, but I would also want people to read your book who really want to understand the terms and the things that are in the book for their parenting, for their leadership, wherever they're in leadership, because we're all in leadership in some part of our life. It might be in a church, it might be in our workplace, it might be in a school, it might be in our, neighborhood.
Oh, yeah. I think the messaging speaks to everybody. Like I said, I live my entire life as a centaur as much as possible, whether I am the rider or the horse. Like you were talking about, and I'll say the word God is the ultimate rider who wants us to be beautiful horses in our life. And I'm happy to take the direction from something higher than me. I mean, not always, but in when I'm a good centaur, right? And it's better for me in the long run. So I did write the book with that in mind. I use most of my examples with horses because horses, like you can kind of BS people. Like we can use terms and euphemisms. We can say we're doing this, but horses, and why working with horses, why I encourage people, even if they don't want to ride a horse, A horse will just leave. And that's why I do so much liberty work. So in liberty work, you have no rope on the horse. You might have a whip or a stick to extend your energy bubble because they're so big and we're so small. We just need, sometimes you need to be safe and just say, no, that's my energy bubble. But the horse can leave. They will leave you if you, and it's not that, and it's, I mean, we could talk about this forever, but in horses, operant conditioning is very, with it is very strong. So punishment and reward, basically. But those become extrinsic. And what in straightness training in the program that I'm licensed in, it's about finding something higher than that. It's about finding a relationship. The horse brings their best to the table. They want to solve the puzzle that you're guiding them towards, which it's a win-win. It helps them develop physically and emotionally and spiritually. Horses are textbook neurotic. So I wouldn't want to live a life interpreting everything as eating me. So giving them comfort in the human world is helpful for their balance. The punishment and rewards, and there's a lot of tension in the horse world between people who do clicker treat training versus pressure and release. So the horses are very honest. You cannot BS a horse. A horse can read your energy like people can't, and we can. Humans can. We just rationalize. Have you ever heard that?
Yes,
that's why our brains are so big, so we can lie to each other.
Yeah, well, and I think we do know better, but we don't know what it all means. So we kind of feel the wrongness of it, but we can't untangle it. So
Yeah.
one of the things that when you talk about the tension in the horse world around punishment and reward, I mean, it's that way in our work as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
The world's in that. That's why I wanted the tagline shifting power over and power under to power within and power between, because that is about creating a relationship instead of a dominant slave kind of dynamic, which I guess
Yes.
is a relationship of sorts. And I think of the movie Buck as he was a centaur.
Yes.
And would you explain an example for our audience of what you mean when you say I am a centaur? And I want you to go into a story if you could, because I think it makes it more like, oh, now I can connect the dots between what she's saying. But I want you to know, in looking at your photos and talking to you the last couple of times, I feel such a shift in you. You've always been an amazing person, but I feel like an incredible joy and an incredible oneness with life that I could see in your photos that you just sent me yesterday or today. And so it is life-changing what you're talking about. So can you give us all an example of what it means to be a good centaur?
Or, good, bad. Whenever we introduce tension, like whenever we introduce performance, we introduce tension. So it's not that I'm a good centaur, but that when I act or I remind myself of the centaur model, things happen that I want to have happen.
Yeah. So to take the good and bad out of it, what does it mean to be a centaur?
Connecting through the heart so that the vision, the rational brain, whoever's leading, can help the horse achieve that goal.
Okay.
And so the triune brain model, and I know it's not perfect science, but it's helpful that we have a neocortex that thinks things. We have the limbic system, the mammal brain with emotions and bonding. And then we have the subconscious or the reptilian brain that governs how our body moves, why it does what it does, and the just basic survival. So let me think of I'm trying to think of a good story.
Well, maybe it was when you talked about ballroom dancing with your husband that maybe that's what you mean when you're saying I do my best to be a centaur. When you're work in the workplace where you're working with all these men and you're focusing on how do I bring all of those elements together? I mean, when I think of the workplace, I look at that reptilian brain as people don't even feel psychologically safe
Yes.
in
Yeah.
their bodies. But how do you get to that elevated state where you have that limbic system and all of those ways of connection? Because you call it connection. What did you call it? Connection driven learning.
Connection driven learning. Yeah. Well, I think the number one thing I do is Adlerian redirect. I think that has a perfect overlap of every Adlerian redirect starts with emotion, and you see somebody in a mistaken goal, their nervous system is in fight, flight, or freeze or fawning. And then when you redirect, you're seeing them, you're telling them they're safe, and you're soothing them. And then adults, we're often in the mistaken goal of significance. We think we don't belong. We have to prove that we're the best or else people reject us. So I see that in the workplace. It's my favorite mistaken goal personally. And the last thing people want to do is quote, pump up somebody's ego. And when you do an Adlerian redirect, that's what they need. They need to be soothed. You need to tell them you are a top performer. You're the best. Like you're at the top of your game. You offer so much. And when they feel that, they're safe, seen, soothed, and then they can contribute from a wise mind, from their neocortex. They're not trying to prove. And that's living as a centaur. And we
I
can do
love
that
that.
all the
I
time.
love that. So, living as a centaur, I would also say to kind of bring this home to the listeners, living as a centaur is living in emotional and social intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
First, I'm self-aware of my own emotions so that I don't go into dysregulation, which a lot of people don't know what that means, but that means we're almost consumed by our reptilian brain and we're in fight and flight
Fight, flight, freeze. Yeah.
and all of that. So when we're calm enough in redirecting negative behaviors, what Kristen's referring to, which our company also teaches, is that I'm checking in with what am I feeling so that I become connected with my own experience and my own mental awareness about what's going on in the other person. And then when I understand that, I remember, oh, they're just in fear right now. They're in fight or flight. How would I help them move out of that? And our very commitment to that is on the way to soothing and helping them be seen. And you gave the example of the goal of significance where you help that person verbally by saying you are doing awesome, even though our reptilian brain would like to run as far away as possible at first if we're not aware, because we feel dominated by that person's fear.
Mm-hmm.
And they're puffing up and all of that. And as we understand that they just want us to reject them, they just want us to make them less important, and we refuse to. That's what's being a centaur, which
Yeah.
is managing that relationship, managing that connection with the person until they come to themselves, and then they're in their best dance.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's a
Yeah.
lot of it. Or I used the word troll. I have no idea if they're a troll or not, but somebody who was vicious to me on social media. And this is new for me. I reached out to somebody. I sent it to a friend and she immediately called me and she offered me being safe, seen, soothed. I immediately told my husband. I didn't, because I was really rattled. I was way in fight flight. I was nauseous. I mean, it was really not good. But I reached out for connection first, where in the past I would have said, oh, you're being a baby. Oh, just get over it. Like, this is just words on a screen. Like, what is that? Sticks and stones may break my bones. And I said, and now as a center, I'm like, no, connection before anything, even self-attunement. The more that, as parents, when we can tell a child, oh, you're feeling embarrassed, oh, you're feeling upset or not, when we can be granularly empathetic and tell them this is normal, you should feel this way. When we're not gaslighting ourselves or trying to fight the very emotion, when I can say, of course, I'm going to feel nauseous. My limbic system, my nervous system feels attacked. And then I can reach out for connection.
Yeah.
And the book goes into all of this overlap with the ventral vagal social engagement and the nervous system. And it's all the same and it's all beautiful. So
Yeah.
living as a centaur for myself means to self-soothe and reach out for connection.
It's almost like you're redirecting yourself.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
what you're describing is the goal of revenge, where somebody is doing something that shocks you
Yeah.
and hurts you. And the root of that is I have to gaslight myself because I can't reach out when I'm in pain. And yet you redirected yourself and said, I'm going to reach out while I'm in this pain.
And
I love
yeah,
that.
I know that I could reach out to this person if I wanted to expend the energy. And there's pushback from people with horses and people where they just say, oh, that's just a bad person. That's just a psychopath. That's just that horse is just aggressive. And if we give them these labels, then it abdicates us of any responsibility for helping redirect them. And I get that. It's not my responsibility necessarily to redirect this person, but I have such a faith in the magic that if I wanted to, I could reach out to that troll. And I totally believe, but under all of that is a lot of hurt.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
some of that, and I believe there's healing. I don't believe that horses or humans or mammals are like I said, through like the weed in the sidewalk, we can heal, but there's an element of, that's their responsibility, and this is my responsibility. The hours in the day I have are for my kids, they're for my husband, for the people, that there's just a lot of calmness in me as a centaur saying, this is the horse I'm going to ride, like choosing,
Kristen, I've come to the conclusion that when we've even been able to redirect ourselves, like you're describing, where you got what you needed to heal from this, the being seen and soothed and all of that, I think it makes a difference in the world. It may not help that person directly, although I even believe spiritually it could help that person directly, because you've already just said to me, to us, I know that person's got a lot of pain. That is something that I believe transcends even our physical bodies. Even though it's most ideal when it's not just in our heads. But you are going to be a walking centaur in the world, which is going to make a difference for lots of other people that are in your vicinity, especially your family, the people that you work with. And then as you become stronger and stronger, you might reach back to somebody that does that to you and say, hey, is anything going on that you need to share? I'd be happy to listen separately. You might do that someday, but you don't need to do that. Just not hurting them is doing something good.
Yeah.
Engaging with them and doing something harmful to them, and your consciousness about not dehumanizing them. So I know we're about a minute or two away from wrapping this interview up. Gosh, it went by quickly. Is there anything that you would like to say that you would like to help people to take a next step in their life, to get in touch with you around your book, anything that you would like to say as a final word? And then I'll go ahead and wrap up for us.
Yeah, I would love people to visit my website, kristenschweizer.com. You can buy my book. You can sign up for email updates. You can sign up for my newsletter, because my goal is to live life as a centaur, and I want to nurture other centaurs. I think it's hard to imagine the magic that attunement can create, and not just ooey gooey, but like physical results. People can reach their goals, whatever they are and what they want to master, by being a centaur. And so my goal is to nurture and find and create and build up more centaurs. I want a herd of centaurs. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And to my listeners, I want you to know that there's hope for another way of doing things. My guest, Kristen, today, my guest, Alfie, today, were to really show you alternatives to doing power over and power under, and instead developing the power within and the power between, and that power is love. And so I invite you to keep looking for, and it isn't always ooey gooey, but it is a beautiful, real, felt experience. And I appreciate so much that you've tuned in today, and that I've had you as a wonderful guest today, Kristen. Thank you so much.
So happy to be here. Thank you, Judy.
You've been listening to When Everyone Wins, where we're shifting power over and under to power within and between. I'm Judy Ryan, your transformation talk radio host. Tune in each second and fourth Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time to learn new concepts and tools, and listen to conversations I have with thought leaders and change agents. You'll also see real-world applications of what I'm covering, so that you experience the power of the concepts and tools I share. In each episode, I bring you my knowledge from decades in workplace culture transformation and leadership development as the founder and CEO of LifeWorks Systems. I invite you to call in with your unique stories and questions. The path to ensure that everyone wins depends on our ability as people to create a life we love and help others do the same. For more information, visit lifeworksystems.com.